Straight up 12 o'clock. I'd like to welcome you to the July Learn at Lunch webinar presented by the Utah State University Forestry Extension in partnership with the Utah Division of Forestry, Fire and State Lands. I am Meredith Perkins. I'm the Urban and Community Forestry Coordinator with the Division of Forestry, Fire and State Lands, and I'll be hosting this webinar and acting as the moderator for any questions that come up during the course of the presentation. Megan Dittenmeyer with Utah State Extension is also helping out behind the scenes. If you have any trouble with your technology or your setup or need some support, feel free to set a private chat up with Megan and she can get you troubleshooting any problems that you might have. Again, to set up a private chat, basically you hover over the name of the individual you would like to start a private chat with, and a little bubble will come out and you can select private chat at that moment. And then you have a private conversation with that person and can manage whatever information you need. If you have questions regarding setup and audio problems or other technical issues, again, please start that private chat with Megan. Our speaker will set aside time at the end of the presentation to answer any questions from the audience. So if you have questions for the speaker during the talk, go ahead and type them in the chat box, and I will relay those messages to Paul as time allows, and we'll try and get those through the presentation as well as then at the end. This webinar is being recorded. You can find it later on the forestry.usu.edu website or on the Facebook page USU Extension Forestry. There are ISA CEUs available for participants who stay engaged throughout the whole presentation. So to receive those CEU credits, type your full name and ISA certification number in a private chat with me, Meredith Perkins, and I will fill out the certification sheet here at my desk and send it on to ISA. Before we get started, I'd like to encourage you to participate in the polls. Hopefully you all have already done that. We will open those polls up again at the end of the presentation if you didn't have a chance to do that prior, and we'll collect all the information about who you are and where you're coming from. Paul also wanted me to mention that the photo that we use in the cover slide for a lot of the publicity is not a photo from Michigan State University. The picture of the London plane tree with roots severed on both sides in the park strip came from a local municipality and was not a Michigan State issue. So just wanted to get that disclaimer out there and not get Paul in trouble. With that, we'll get started. I'd like to introduce our speaker. His name is Paul Shwartz. Paul has been a campus arborist at Michigan State University since 1989. He manages over 20,000 trees on campus there. He also participates in numerous speaking engagements across the country. Paul has a degree in forestry from Michigan State University and has previous experience in private tree care as well as for urban forestry consulting. I am going to go ahead and turn the time over now to Paul. And Paul, go ahead and use those arrows down at the bottom of your page, and I will mute my mic. It's all yours.
Okay, Meredith, does the sound okay right now?
You're coming through perfectly.
Oh, great. Okay, we finally got it figured out. So I had two speakers here I was working on. So, well, I'm very glad to be here, and this is my first time as presenting a webinar, and it's a little more difficult than what I kind of imagined, but I hopefully will get through it. And I'll start off on the slides, and this is a presentation I've done many times for many other areas, and it's something that we really look forward to sharing with you today, and hopefully you'll be able to glean a few things from it. So let's get started right away. Just as an introduction to MSU, if you're not familiar with Michigan State University's campus, it was founded in 1855 as one of the nation's first land-grant universities, and we have over 5,000 acres with more than 2,000 acres in the maintained part of campus. And I'm going to go through this rather quickly because I have a lot to cover later on, and I want to make sure I get everything covered. So MSU campus facts also include 20,000 trees and 7,500 different plant species, over 49,000 students, and that figure seems to be rising every year. So this is a picture of our campus that I actually took, flew over and rented an airplane one time and took over a picture of the campus. And actually what I was trying to find was to kind of look at the campus and see if there was any chlorotic looking trees which indicated stress, and I could see it from a large angle. But what it really showed me was our south campus, which is everything south of the river, is pretty much, this is the river that runs through the main part of campus, and this is the limits of our northern part. And what you see here is on the north side is our earliest, that's East Lansing, which borders our northern part of our campus. And the original part of the campus was actually in 1855, is this part right there. And so development after 1950 occurred south of the river, and what you see is a much reduced size of the overall tree canopy. And what we determined, it took me quite a while to determine it, was the fact that pretty much all the soil on South Campus was very compacted, and actually to the bulk density of concrete in some areas. So, and that was largely due to the fact that everything built on South Campus was built, like I said, in the 50s, and the heavy equipment that was used, the bulldozers and cranes and all that, when they built a building, they'd clear the land and basically, you know, compact the soil very much so. And when it was done, they would basically grade the soil and put down 6 inches of topsoil. Well, we were planting trees in that soil, that very compacted soil, and in one building, one of the workers actually said they had to use jackhammers to get the trees planted at our the arts building. And those trees, they grew there for 20 years, but then 20 years later they actually blew out of the ground, so they weren't able to establish a root system. So compacted soil is something that we're very much dealing with. And and then I'll be talking more about that in the rest of my talk here. So the reasons why we preserve trees on campus naturally is the primary reason is number one is for the beauty of the campus, and number one reason why students choose to come to MSU. Also for teaching and research. You know, one tree was used 800 times by different classes and research projects. Also, we want to preserve the historic campus. And so the reasons to preserve the trees, continuing on, is alumni and public support for the beautification of the campus, which is very strong. And as you can see, here's a number of flowering dogwoods and a flowering cherry on North Campus in the springtime. So it's also environmentally sound, as you may know, very well know. Benefits the watershed, reduces energy consumption. And we also fortunately have the support of our administration. This is our river that runs through the main part of campus, the Red Cedar. And we're very conscious of that and what flows into it. And the trees are a big part of, you know, preserving and filtering all the runoff that goes into this campus at the time. This is an example of some construction damage. This is on my drive home from work every night. And this building was going up, a new gas station. And as you can see, they were driving underneath the trees. Trying to get my pointer here. And there's also soil piled up around the roots of those particular trees. And so without tree protection, 2 years later, we had complete mortality of those trees. And they were eastern cottonwoods, and they're usually pretty tough trees to kill. Here's a tree on campus during one of our construction projects, a white pine. And we did install tree protection around it. At the time, we were using the womanized wood, and it took a hard beating from the construction traffic, but we were able to protect that critical root zone around the base of the tree. And so after 2 years of construction, these are the trees 10 years after construction. And so they were very well, are surviving very well. And also the English oak that you see here and on each end were also protected during the construction process. So then, to talk about a little bit about our tree protection in the past, in the 60s we found this old slide, and we think this might be a tree protection. We're not sure, but it did not protect the critical root zone of the trees, and these trees are all dead right now. Today we're actually installing this white PVC, and it's in my specs, and my specs, our construction specs, are available if you would like a copy of them via email, and I'd be glad to send those to you. I think we might have them located somewhere on site. But anyway, we install this, and last couple years we've actually used over 10,000 lineal feet of this this construction fencing. That's how much actual construction has been going on campus every year. So in this case, this is what we use presently, and it seems to be working out very well. The contractors respect it very much so. Protection, some other protection methods that I'll be discussing today are fencing, root trenching, directional boring, shoring methods, curbing techniques, and chemical treatments. So we'll be going through all of these today. What is the correct level of tree protection? And this may be considered good. The orange snow fence, we really don't consider that tree protection. It's much too easy to take down, and the contractors, if you're not there with them constantly, they really don't respect it that much. But in the case where we had an emergency, we had to put up something up very quickly, we used the orange. But what really works is as you can see down in this area, the wood chips, 10 to 12 inches of wood chips will relieve any prevent any compaction from occurring to the soil if you have a temporary road that you need to access and bring heavy equipment under. And then what would be better would be chain link or wire fencing, but we've also had in cases where this has also been moved by the contractors and the area violated under the trees. What we found the best tree protection to be is the white PVC, as I mentioned before. And it's basically the typical ranch fencing that you pick up at, it's for any farm or ranch type fencing. And it's white PVC. We have it milled and built to our specifications, which are again on those specifications online. And they're 8-foot posts, but they're very easy to install. We can actually install 100 feet of this in about 15 minutes, 2 people. In this case, we just drive T-post into the ground, as you can see, and just drive them in about 6 inches, so we don't really have to do a misdig on the utilities. And then we just slide the white post over the T-post, and then it just snaps, the rails just snap in very easily. And as you can see in the background that's installed, it looks pretty good, and actually we've had people ask us if we're going to leave it up after the construction project. So, and it really does seem to keep the traffic off the root system. So some pre-treatments I'll discuss today are root trenching for a new curb. And in this case, we do not condone root cutting it by any means, but in this case, they're going to have to pull the old curb out. They will tell you they need 24 inches behind the curb for the new forms and to work. Well, we give them 12 to 18 inches, and we make that that trench cutting or cleanly cutting any roots off with this type of machine here. It only goes down about 12 inches, but we can get the major roots. And this prevents them from cutting back into the critical root zone of the tree, and also causing, well, we've actually had them grab a root and actually rip it up the side of the tree. So this seems to work out very well for new curbs. We do it with parking lots also. And in the case where we're putting on a new road, there's actually a tree located right in this area over here. And so again, the depth only goes down about 12 inches, but I just wanted to discuss that most of the roots are within the upper 2 feet. 95% of the roots are within the upper 2 feet surface of the soil. So we want to really protect that critical root zone, and in this case we'll find out if there are any major roots at that area. So the other thing we do is directional boring. We started this many years ago when it was fairly expensive to do, but we're able to pull 2-inch gas line over 600 feet. We can go underneath the root system of trees, and with the directional boring machine you can adjust it up and down, right and left, while it's in the ground. So it's we actually picked up one of these machines. The physical plant department is using it to install electrical lines throughout campus, which they're aging to where they all need to be replaced at this point. All of our utilities are underground, by the way, and that includes steam and electrical. So very good tool to use to preserve trees in construction zones. We also use sheet piling and shoring methods whenever we have a deep trench, and we have a lot of those on campus. This is a 30-foot deep trench for steam and other utilities, water, main, things like that, sewer. And in this case we would have had to step back and actually would have gone into the root zone of that tree, but by using the sheet piling this will protect and preserve that root zone. And we also use other types of shoring, that the H-beam shoring with the wood drop down in between it. And in this case we had to there was a tree located right here, and we had to waterproof this building, and this temporary shoring was put in to preserve that but also be able to get the job done. And that tree was still surviving today. It's an elm tree, which in this case I mentioned we do not cut roots for any other reason other than that first example I showed you. In this case we had an elm tree that they're critical. Your major structural support roots are within 3 to 5 feet of the trunk of the tree, and then your transport roots are beyond that. Well, we didn't want to disturb. We had a smaller sidewalk going in here previously, and we did not want to cut or disturb any of the roots of this old existing elm tree. And so we bridged over the root system with sand, and we did when we poured the sidewalk we had to build this curb to hold it, and we also had to put fence posts in to prevent people from stepping off the curb, the high curb. And in this case, when our standard spec for sidewalks is 6 inches, and we have a lot of vehicular traffic on it at times, and so we build it pretty heavy. And in case of a tree root system, we'll bridge over the root system with 2 inches of sand or so, and then we'll reduce the cement to 4 inches with reinforced wiring to support the concrete. So those are the modifications we will do when we have a root system and tree, the sidewalk come in conflict. In this case, we actually was a bald cypress. We needed to put a temporary walk in, and we actually put down PVC and geotextile fabric, and the PVC had holes in it to let the air exchange continue underneath the asphalt. And this was supposed to be temporary. It lasted 2 years, but the tree survived very well. No visible signs of damage or injury to the tree. And since we have since moved the sidewalk out away from the tree. So that's one of the things you can do. What you might notice here are the step curbs that we have, and I think we're probably one of the only places I've seen this occur on campus anywhere. And what happens is when we have to lower the road grade, and this would be the new curb going back in, well, we'd have to step back or grade back the lawn area to the new curb. Well, what we've done is actually built the curb up to meet the old grade, and that way we preserve any of the root system back to the oak tree. This is something that I was at a meeting, I was at a conference. It was a landscape below ground. It was one of the first ones at the Morton Arboretum. And it was discussed about putting sulfur under sidewalks to prevent the roots from occurring. So we've been using this for the last 14 or 15 years. And we just use granular sulfur. It's just a 90% granular sulfur. Very, very inexpensive. It's about 50 cents a pound. And we actually just spread it on the surface of the soil. And I actually did a rate the other day, and it's about 20 to 25 pounds per 100 square feet. And just put it on fairly thickly on the surface, just below before the concrete is poured. And what this does is it prevents the exploratory roots that come in from the tree, and they are usually microscopic roots that go underneath the sidewalk in that small space between the concrete and the surface of the soil. And as they reach the soil, the fine soil on the other side, and become those small microscopic roots become transport roots, and that's what we found that actually lifts the sidewalk. Most of the soil below the sidewalk is compacted to 90 pounds per square inch, so the roots aren't going to go below that or through that. They're going to go right in that area and then become so if you can prevent those, and that's what we feel it's a cheap insurance policy using the sulfur. And it also, in our case, we have very high alkaline soils, and in some cases with the oak trees and that, it actually helps and benefits the trees by we've actually greened some trees up by using the sulfur. So the other thing we've tried in the past couple years or so is the use of PGRs. And basically we like to, the PGRs will stimulate root production of the trees prior to construction. And it also, you know, with trees that you have that are in restricted root zones, such as parking lots, and plants in restricted spaces that need to be contained, or you know, you want to control the size of them. And the plant growth regulators that we were using was paclibutazole, and it was injected right at the root zone, I mean the crown of the tree. And it can also be applied as a soil drench application also. We used this injector wand, which gave us the exact amount that we were applying, and it was very quick. And after injection of the plant, in this case it was a cotoneaster in a gardens area, we felt that it will also help reduce maintenance costs by reducing pruning. And in this case, it was needed to be pruned at least 3 times a year to keep it from the beds that you see here. And after the injection, we only had to do 1 pruning that year. So it can be applied to all different types of plants and species of plants and trees and shrubs even. And so we've had some mixed results on some shrubs, but on some trees we're seeing, you know, deeper green foliage and thicker foliage. And so moving on to moving trees, we have fortunately a very active tree planting program. We have our own site crew that does the planting, and in 2008 we actually planted 1,200 trees. We normally plant 200 to 300 trees a year, and so in this case we actually moved this large tree. It was in a way of a new parking ramp that was being installed, and it was one of 3 trees, so we wanted to keep it, and so we moved it about 50 feet, and we actually used this framing system. It's called a Newman tree frame, and it's from England. And we moved this tree bare root, I mean not bare root, but in the, it wasn't a, you know, most of them are frozen root balls, but in this case we were able to contain the root ball, pick the tree up. There's actually an I-beam here, and we pick all the weight up using those I-beams and moved it about 50 feet. And that tree is still surviving today and is doing very well. So again, we do a lot of B&B trees, and we also are fortunate to have our own 90-inch tree spade. And here's a case of moving a pink dogwood that was actually, we had to move that thing twice. It was moved in the wrong place the first time. So again, this is doing construction. The area can look like a war zone. It's very very torn up, and a lot of tree protection, you know, looks pretty bad, but the tree protection was installed properly and had a lot of pre-planning involved. And then today, that area is pretty much looks as it was before the construction even began. So very successful. 8 years later, which is what, you know, our customers and we wanted to preserve these old American elms and the other trees in the area. So one other things I wanted to talk about was the supersonic pneumatic excavation. You may have heard of it as air spading or air knife. There were the two other terms for it, but we actually used it. We can move trees bare root with it, excavate roots before construction, and to discover girdling roots. In this case, we actually had to move this oriental cedar about 30 feet or 50 feet for a construction project, in about a day and a half of air spading, and we came up with this. And it was in April. This was, like I said, a cedar tree, and we were able to pick it up and just with the forklifts and move it about 50 feet, place it in the ground, put the soil back in, and it was very, worked out very well. The tree was very stable. We actually staked it and did some cabling, but we really didn't need to. Once the soil's back on the root system, it was very stable. And the tree is still doing well. This was 3 growing seasons later. It's about 4 or 5 right now, and the tree is still doing very well. So we can also use the air spade to expose roots, and this is the elm tree. We wanted to find out where the roots were before we started digging for the new sidewalk, and sure enough, we found plenty of roots, and we will bridge over those roots with sand and then pour our sidewalk and not disturb any of those major structural support roots of that tree. In this case, we also needed to put a new heated walk in, excavated with the air spade, and found the roots actually came up to where we needed to go and then went down. And so we think that was a result of many years ago we used cinders on the sidewalk and from the power plant, and the cinders actually are acidic, so that would cause the roots also to not want to go into those areas. So this was a very good case. We were able to save this tree. And here's a case where we had to widen the road for a new bike lane, and the stakes are where the new curbing would go. And we actually found, after doing the air spading, we did not have any roots in that area, so we were able to adjust it slightly, install the new curb, and move it back, and that tree is still surviving today, doing very well. This is a case where we needed to put a new sidewalk in, and we found actually that I knew if we did any excavation in this area, we would be showing, causing a lot of damage to these particular trees there. So we did the air spading and found out that yes, we did have quite a few roots in that area, and we were able to instead of destroying any of those roots by excavation, we were able to backfill around them with a crushed stone, and we installed a porous sidewalk, a rubber sidewalk, and that sidewalk is still in existence today. It's been about 4 or 5 years. We snow plow it, and it's held up very well, and the roots are very happy and haven't been disturbed. We have progressed or gone to a new type of sidewalk. It's called porous rubber sidewalk, instead of the actual one that you saw previously. And the porous rubber is working out very well. We only need about 2 inches of base for that, and the porous rubber sidewalk is about 2 inches thick. So with that, minimal disturbance to the subgrade. It's highly permeable. It lets the water through very well. It's flexible, and it prevents compaction and resists cracking. And so there's a picture of it. And what's nice about it is it comes in different colors. You can, whatever color you would like, red, green, or whatever, and it works out very well. It's a little more expensive than poured the cement sidewalks, but we feel the benefits around trees are worth it. And here's a sidewalk that's the porous rubber sidewalk. It's made from, uses about 300 ground-up rubber tires, I think, per 1,000 square feet or something like that. But there is I can send you some data on that if you're interested. But works out very well. And we also use the pneumatic spade for finding. We have found that when we have a tree that has a flare that goes in the ground and we don't have any taper on it, that we did the excavation and found, yes, we do have quite a few girdling roots that are being formed. In this case, with the existing wire basket was still there. But then these early girdling roots, so we're able to, if you can catch a tree that's planted within the last 10 years or so, or earlier, that you can correct this situation and remove these girdling roots before they can become stem girdling roots and cause excessive damage or actually loss of the tree. So these are the things we use the excavation for, is correct the correct planting depth, expose the root flare, which we're finding a lot of problems are resulting from being planted too deep. And it can also be used to relieve compaction around the tree. You can till up the soil with it very well and mix in a little compost and really turn a lot of trees around that are suffering from compacted soil. You can also use it to trench in utilities through the root zones. Here's a case of some very deeply planted trees. We could not even find the root flare, and after a foot deep. And these trees were struggling severely after we excavated them, somewhat removing that overtill over the root flare in that root zone area. They responded very well, came out of a declining situation and started putting on new growth. And it really shows up well on evergreens. So if you see that telephone pole pattern going in the ground, this is one of the first things to check for to get that root flare exposed. And a lot of times you may have a bowl around the tree. As long as you keep that bowl open and don't backfill it with anything with wood chips and that, it survive. But the most important thing is to basically plant the tree correctly to begin with, and that's with the root flare 1 to 2 inches above grade. And in this case, excessive mulch, we've been real guilty of this in a lot of cases, and anything over 3 inches, is excessive, and definitely don't want to pack it and flare it up around the trunks of the trees. What happens is you'll get this massive root development right beneath the surface, which is real susceptible to drought, and especially if you get into a drought situation. These trees were irrigated, and that's another reason why all these roots were forming near the surface of the soil. So we reduce our limit our mulch now to 3 inches and keep it at least a foot away from the trunk of the tree if possible. We also found that we had leaf scorch on our red oaks, some of our red oak trees, and discovered that a lot of the, we did a demonstration with a number of trees and checking nutrient deficiencies and things like that, and basically found out that the trees that were buried too deeply were having an issue, and that was with the buried trunk flare. And the leaf scorch would be a symptom of that. In this case, we planted these oak trees in 1991. 1990, 1991, and now they were planted too deeply to begin with. They were over mulched, and the trees actually, we did the air spading on. This tree had actually died, so we were digging it up and checking out, doing an autopsy on the root system. And we found the root basket, the basket was still there, and the secondary root system had formed, and that's what was trying to keep the tree alive, and it wasn't able to keep the crown alive well enough. And that's the distorted vascular system that was formed in that secondary root system. We actually injected dyes into the tree, and you know, you could see this really convoluted root system. So, and when we dug up the tree, we found that the primary root system was buried and it actually died, and so that secondary root system had come on and was trying to take over for the primary, but it wasn't enough to keep the tree alive and sustained. I wanted to also cover with you some innovative irrigation techniques that we've come up with. This is a drip irrigation. It's called Netafin material. It's plastic, and it has a baffle on the. It's a drip irrigation that we put. It goes underground, but anyway, we put one section over the root ball. 18 inches out, we'll install another section, and then another 18 inches out. And the idea is that after the first couple years, we'll sever this first root system, and then another 3 or 4 years, we'll sever that. We want to. The idea is to continue to have the roots to continue to keep going out instead of, you know, staying that one area like we saw in that previous picture. So this is a case. This Netafin was installed all under the turf, and the entire turf was going to be actually irrigated with this underground. But the trees were on a separate system, so they were watered once a week on a very maybe an inch or two once a week, just to support the trees, and they were doing very well. Putting on probably, with this system that we've installed, we were seeing a foot of growth a year on some of these trees that were newly transplanted. So instead of installing it before the tree was, well, when the tree was being planted, we waited. We came up with an idea to do it after the tree was planted, and using this trencher, we installed the irrigation, and it worked out very well. And the trees, again, like I said, are putting on a tremendous amount of growth, no loss of particular trees. And after a while, the idea is to get the trees on their own and to have a healthy root system. We also treatments for compacted soils. We will come in after the construction is done and to scarify the soil to relieve that soil compaction, and this is on all of our construction projects before we put down topsoil. And so that's built into our construction inspection. We'll go out and inspect before the topsoil is installed to make sure the contractor has scarified the soils. And this is something that we came up with. We have 6-7 football games a year, home football games, and about 50,000 visitors at that time. Vehicle traffic, sometimes quite heavy, and they would park up under our trees for football games. So we came up with this this logo and this sign, and we put out about 350, 400 of these signs before every football game to ask people not to park up on the turf and under the trees especially. And it's worked out very well. They've really, once we've educated them as to the reason why we're trying to do that, it's worked out very well, and they really respect our trees now much more than in the past. And for the reason of, you know, we don't, driving over the root system of a tree 6 or 7 times with a heavy piece of equipment can compact to the bulk density of concrete, so we want to prevent that whenever possible. So we have football games, tailgates, camps, etc. The other thing I wanted to show you quickly was our staking. When we do have to stake a tree on a newly planted tree that was planted, we will install these hardwood stakes. They're oak, 2 by 2 inch oak, and then we What's nice about these is, and after 2 years, normally we don't want the staking to be on there more than 2 years. The oaks will rot right at the ground level and actually start snapping off if we forget to take them off for some reason, and it will actually tell us it's time to take the stakes off. But the other interesting, we use a strapping technique, so we let the tree move back and forth a little bit, and this helps develop a good strong root system. Supportive root system. So, but we also give the tree a little bit of leeway to move, and it seems to work out very well. We place these on the windward side of the tree, so I've actually had 40, 50 mile, 60 mile an hour gusts come through, and the trees will survive those heavy gusts. So. And one of the other big things is education on construction for even our own people, our own tradespeople, the plumbers and the underground steam tunnel water people that do the installations, electricians especially. We actually do an educational. I go and try to talk to the crews and present them with this same information I'm showing you today, and show them the importance and the value of the trees here on campus. So that seems to have worked out very well. We also do this with any new contractor coming on campus. They have to, I do this presentation as class for them, and that has worked out tremendously. I've done over 1,000 of these in the last 10 years or so, and given these to the new contractors, and they actually go away with new respect for trees, and actually will go into other projects off campus and get in touch with me and say, yeah, we were at this city, and we let them know how to try to handle this area or this situation. So it's good to know, and it's a good feeling that the word is getting out, and eventually we can get it out to a lot more people, and especially the ones that are impacting the trees directly. So that's just as an overview and a pre-plan for construction. Protect that critical root zone and plant the correct height. I find it's one of our biggest things that we're dealing with 20, 30 years later, is trees that were planted incorrectly. And so we're really addressing that. Do not overmulch, and be innovative with your irrigation techniques. So, and consider the advantages of growth regulators, but they also have a lot of rate is very important. You can over-regulate the plants, and then usually takes 2 to 3 years for them to come out of it. So just be very careful with that. So that's the end of my slide presentation and the PowerPoint, and I think we have a time for questions.
Perfect timing, Paul. We do have some questions here. The first question is, have you had any experience with structural soil, and do you use that on campus?
Yes, we have, and that's we actually it was called the Amsterdam. There was an Amsterdam tree soil when it first came out, and it was using pea gravel and some organic matter, and that we have some trees planted that growing very well. We haven't done a lot with it recently, but I'm very I think that's a very good option, and something that to look into using it in areas that need it. I think it'd be an excellent choice.
Great. We've got another question about wire baskets. Do you make a particular effort to remove wire baskets?
Yes, we do. We remove the upper half of the basket, and we cut that off completely, and also remove any burlap that is there to a depth that you can. Usually once it's in the hole, we do that. So there's a special tool you can get to cut the wire basket that's so you can cut it as low as possible, and we find that's our best. Removing the burlap is very important also. I didn't mention, but actually when you're getting a B&B tree, it's critical to find that root flare, and a lot of times in B&B we're finding that's like 6 to 7 inches, could be buried up to 8 inches deep in the root ball, and that has to be exposed before you plant the tree. That can't be buried. So that root filler has to be at grade or 1 to 2 inches above grade, and it will set on the hole, so that's why we say 1 to 2 inches above grade. But I use a surveyor stake or a sharp, like a long rod that you can stick down next to the B&B tree when it's delivered or you're buying it, and to find out, when it goes down, it'll actually hit the root flare. You can tell how deep it is in the ball, and that'll also indicate to you how deep to make your hole, how deep to dig your hole. But again, we're trying to hopefully get to where the plants will be delivered. The root filler will be at the surface of the B&B tree. That's one of the big things that because if it's deep, if it's 8 inches deep, you're losing 50% of your root mass anyway, which you're paying premium price for. So those are something to be careful of, and we're dealing with a lot of our suppliers and that to make sure that they're delivering us trees that are planted or dug correctly and in the root ball when we receive them. So.
Great. All right, Darren Nerden is wondering if you have experience using Rainbird
if
deep
that's
watering
the
systems
tube
on
that
campus.
goes down into the, I'm not sure exactly what he means. I've seen the tubes that go into the, around the root ball that water is added to them. We have actually did a couple demonstrations on those. Not real conclusive as far as how much of a benefit those are. I was actually going to do a little bit more of a study or demonstration comparing that to trees that were watered. We use gator bags on all of our newly planted trees, and 3 to 4 inch tree we'll use 2 gator bags. A gator bag is a bag, it's a plastic bag that has a small hole in the bottom that will slowly release the water, and it's 20 gallons. I think it holds like 20 gallons, and it takes 3 to 4 hours to release the water. And we water all of our 3 to 4 inch trees once a week, and with that 40 gallons of water, and that seems to work out very well. It's very quick, and the product that you were mentioning, I don't have direct experience with it other than I was going to do a demonstration and compare that to the gator bag and see which one was quicker. Look at the speed and efficiency, and I just wasn't able to do that. So.
All right, Megan's got a question that I had a question about too, is the price difference between the rubber sidewalks that you mentioned and the traditional design. I know you mentioned it's a little bit more expensive, but
feel free to email me.
The real cost
I have
difference
a actual slide presentation on the porous sidewalks, so if at some point we'd like to do that as a webinar. And it has the cost comparisons in the back of it. I can't pull it right off the top of my head, but it is in my mind, when you're looking at the tree health and the tree, the value of the tree, that the cost is definitely doable. And we are installing, and it's something nice or neat about this product is they will actually teach your crews how to do it, and sell you the product, and then teach the crews how to do it, and your own people can install it. But the cost comparison, we've used it in a number of places on campus, and the sustainability issue of it and the fact that it's using ground-up rubber tires, recycled rubber tires, is another good selling point for the product. And it is porous. It holds up very well. We have a very wintry climate here, so it holds up very well in this case. And it's also, if it cracks or breaks, you can actually patch it. It's very easy to patch and to replace the section that was broken or torn out. So a lot of good advantages. Like I said, I have a PowerPoint. I'd be glad to send that to somebody, or maybe even share it. Meredith, we shared something on Dropbox. Maybe I can share that with people.
All right, I think that are the main questions here from the chat, but I did have one other question. It seems like you guys have a lot of resources there at the campus. If you were going to distill down kind of the priorities for someone with a small budget from a small municipality or smaller campus, what would you say are kind of your number one or two go-to tools that you would say if you had to pick these
the
things
air
should
spade
definitely
or
be
air spade,
something to
air
budget
knife,
for
or
in the
pneumatic
future?
excavation tool is very, very valuable. Um, you can do a lot of things with that, and it's very low maintenance. Other than it's just basically a tube with the nozzle on it is a Venturi nozzle that increases the airspeed. So I would say that's a very, very important diagnostic tool, and it also for you know actually doing things that will help the tree's health and benefit the tree in many ways. The I guess that would be the number one thing, and usually the simple tools are the sometimes the best. And we're finding, I guess I'm finding on this campus, is that proper planting techniques on the trees. You're spending a lot of money buying these trees in. Make sure they're planted properly. One of my professors told me, you have a $500 tree and a 50-cent hole, so spend a little more time in preparing the hole and proper planting techniques. And again, like the watering and that's pretty simple. Just make sure it has enough water to get established. But as far as some other tools, I'm not, really, the simpler the better sometimes, and mulch, again, organic matter in the soil is very, very important in our area even. Just having proper soil. Without proper soil, we're finding that our plants just do very well. If they have good soil, the disease, insects, and all the other problems seem to be less prevalent, and the tree is healthy and the plant is healthy. So spend a little more time on soil amendments and things like that, which are pretty readily available to anyone, and not that expensive. So.